So our next guest speaker for today is going to be Randall Kallinen, who is a civil rights attorney here in Houston, who specializes in the areas of police misconduct, civil rights violations, First Amendment rights, and civil liberties. He was the attorney for Kay Staley, who many of you all know, who was a former guest speaker of ours, as was Randall that day as well. She is the former Freedom from Religion Foundation's Freethinker of the Year, which was awarded for the court case where Randall represented her which challenged the Bible monument, which was outside of the Harris County Courthouse in downtown Houston, and successfully got it removed. So, as well as a later lawsuit as well that challenged the practice of prayers before Houston City Council meetings. So please welcome our next guest speaker, Randall Kallinen.
Thank you very much, Vic. Appreciate it. Well, my name is Randall Kallinen, and I am a civil rights lawyer. I've been doing civil rights in Houston for about 20 years, and there are extremely few plaintiff civil rights lawyers, mainly because the law dealing with getting compensation is very tough. Sometimes you hear about large civil rights verdicts, but you seldom hear about them in Texas. You hear about them in California and New York and so forth, because they actually have state laws, which makes it much easier to sue governments and government officials for, violating your civil rights. So I just want to point that out. A little bit about myself. I was born in rural Minnesota, and I went to the University of Minnesota and got a degree in chemistry. Then I moved to Texas, and I got a degree in law from the University of Houston, here in Houston. I've lived in Houston now for almost half of my life, and the other half I lived in Minnesota, and a little bit of time in Austin and in Dallas. A little bit more about my history, legal-wise and civil rights-wise. I was a board member and past president of the Houston ACLU. I was a board member of the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association, which is the largest local state lawyer bar association in the state of Texas for 10 years, and a civil rights lawyer for 20 years. A couple criminal justice. We're talking about criminal justice, so a couple of my cases involving criminal justice. I've had plenty of suing individual police officers for rights, but I also did sue the sheriff once when he was hindering lawyers from visiting their clients in the Harris County jail, and I sued him and got a change in policy there. And also some criminal defense lawyers were using the public records to advertise their services, and there was some judges who came up with some ruling against that, and I had to actually sue some 20-some judges to get rid of that ruling. And that happened early in my career, so once I got that case and won that case, my whole psychology was set for my law career. Once you sue 22 judges, there ain't no going back. But it was funny, the lawyer that I sued for, after I sued those judges, he was always complaining that people were he felt disrespected in the criminal courts. But after that, he told me that they always called him Mr. Sham after that. That was his name, Sham. They called him Mr. Sham after that. Okay. And I also recently had a case where I was the plaintiff, and it went to the Texas Supreme Court, and that was an open records case where the city of Houston was withholding records and then wanted a severe change in the law regarding open records, which would have greatly weakened the people's ability to sue their government to get open records. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we won on that a couple months ago. And so, and that was, and I really like that case because the city of Houston is one of the major people I battle on a lot of these issues. And so that case says Kallinen versus City of Houston, and I won. So that's going to be there forever since it's the Texas Supreme Court. So that's good. And I'm also presently the chair of the Police Accountability Project of the Texas Oklahoma National Lawyers Guild. And today I wanted to talk to you about a lot of criminal justice issues that we have here in the Harris County area. Harris County is the third largest county population-wise in the whole United States. We have over 4 million people in Harris County, And Chicago has Cook County, and that's 5 million people. Then you go over to Los Angeles, and they got 9 or 10 million people in their county. So we are actually the third largest county, and at some point we're going to pass Chicago, because Chicago is not really growing population-wise in that area, but Houston is. So probably in my lifetime we'll become the second most populous county in the whole United States. And most criminal justice issues have to do with county government. Some have to do with city government, but they most have to do with county government, because that's your court system, your county courts, your district courts, your sheriff's department who runs the jail, and so forth. Most of your local issues have to do with the county government. Let me ask you a question here. How many people here believe Americans of all the countries in the world are the most evil people in the world? Okay, I knew there was okay, so you got 4 people out of this many people. Well, we have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, for some reason. And we were speaking earlier about perceptions. How many believe that at this time, let's say in the last decade, the murder rate is about the highest the United States has ever been? How many would believe that?
Oh yeah, it must be.
Well, actually, it's at its lowest rate in about 55 years per capita. The problem you have is mainly I blame a lot on the media. The media sensationalizes they put it on the screens, they put it up on in the media, murder here, murder there. When actually we're at, right now. I was born in 1960, as a matter of fact, and I think this year I'm the least likely to be murdered than any time in my whole existence. So perception does drive a lot of and it's good to know the facts, because a lot of people come with prejudices when it comes to criminal justice. A lot of people might say, "Oh, they committed a crime. This is a crime. Therefore, you need to put these people in prison. You need to jail them for a long time for punishment." A lot of people do have a revenge psychology. I'm sure nobody here has any revenge psychology, but a lot of people do. They want revenge when they hear somebody in the news. They want to do revenge upon them. But a lot of psychological studies, by the way, have shown that punishment really does not work when it comes to recidivism and reform. As a matter of fact, recently, Portugal, for instance, had a huge problem for a long time with heroin addiction. And they got tough on it, like the United States. So they got tough. They're putting people in jail who are heroin addicts. Up to like 1% of the whole population were heroin addicts, which is extremely high. Here in the United States, it's like 0.0 something, some small amount. So they tried this harsh on crime sort of deal, and it didn't seem to work. So then they switched to a new philosophy, which was basically getting people involved in society as much as possible. And now their addiction rate has gone way down. Their prisons are pretty much they've closed a lot of prisons and so forth. And they've discovered that this approach to drug addiction, this integrating people into society, is really working. And they got some of that idea from Vietnam. You've seen the movies where all these Vietnam veterans were using heroin, and you've seen the stories and so forth. And there used to be scary stories and the ideas in the 70s and 80s that or in the 70s, 60s, when these soldiers come back, there's going to be a huge amount of heroin addiction. And the rate for heroin addiction in Vietnam, or for use, was very high. But when the people came back to the United States, there was no continuation, except for a small amount of these people to continue using heroin. So the reason that I wanted to point these things out is that incarceration doesn't seem to work too well for the vast majority of people. Now, of course, there's your mass murderers, which we're not talking about letting them out, and people who are in violent crimes. But when you're talking about minor crimes, especially drug use crimes, there are many other ways to deal with it, in much less expensive ways and much better ways than incarceration. And that's where I wanted to start out, and I wanted to talk about jail overcrowding. The Harris County Jail is about the third or fourth largest jail system in the United States. They have they can hold approximately 10,000 people. Now, in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of media about jail overcrowding, and there was many more people in the jail than there were supposed to be, and there was a lot of problems with the jail. Now, in recent times, according to our past Sheriff Garcia, I guess he's running for mayor now, but Sheriff Garcia, he had actually reduced the jail overcrowding. For a while, they were even sending people to Louisiana to ease the crowding, but that has ended with Sheriff Garcia, and it also, the percentage of people in jail went down, so there wasn't not really any overcrowding at that point. Now, there's other problems with the jail under Garcia, but overcrowding did not seem to be one of them. But now, they are now sending, with the new sheriff, they are sending people once again to Louisiana from the Harris County Jail, which, for those particular people who are sent there on a misdemeanor charge, because to get sentenced to a jail sentence, it's a misdemeanor. If you get a felony, then it's prison, so we're talking about misdemeanor individuals. So one of the issues that that brings up is new jails. There's a lot of talk, or there had been a lot of talk, about making some new jails and expanding the jail system. As a matter of fact, about 10 years ago, I was involved in stopping the expansion of the jail system. I wrote an article for the Houston Chronicle, and there was an editorial piece about how to not get this new jail, why we shouldn't get this new jail. And the price tag on that jail was about $500 million, by the way, to just build the jail, and then to run it was even more. And speaking of that, I was when I was working against this jail, this new jail, I was speaking to an extremely conservative group of people called the Houston Property Rights Association. And just the fact that they have property rights in their title kind of tells you that they're more conservative. And I know there's liberals and conservatives here, but so when I went to speak to them, the first words out of my mouth were not this is going to be good for rehabilitation. The first words out of my mouth were $500 million paid for by property taxes. And that was $500 million. First they introduced me as president of the ACLU, and that didn't go over. That didn't go over too well at the Houston Property Rights Association. But so you always got to speak to your audience. So now I feel there is some more drive with the new sheriff and so forth to try to get maybe this new facility. And I was thinking to myself, well, what's the way to have need for a new facility? Start the overcrowding process. Get more, don't let people out of jail. Keep them in there, a long time. And one of the things at the Harris County Jail, which I suggested to the sheriff, as a matter of fact, was to give everybody 3-for-1, get more people involved, 3-for-1 jail time by getting more people involved in the work program. And he did do that, and he did say that he did. I was taking his deposition in a case where we were suing the Harris County for something, and afterwards, I asked him about that. And he affirmed that it was my suggestion that helped him to get a lot of the jail overcrowding taken care of because he was giving 3-for-1 jail credit. So
What does that mean?
well, 3-for-1. Let's say you're sentenced to 60 days in the Harris County Jail. You can, if you serve 20 days, you just multiply it by 3, and you get out in 20 days. It's called jail credit for good time and for work. Yeah. So, but okay. So another one of the issues, local issues that we have here in Houston, in Harris County, is the lawyers that get appointed to indigent defense. As you all might realize, a good, hard-working lawyer, you're more likely to get your case dismissed, not guilty at trial, and even if those two don't work, you get a shorter sentence. And that is very true. However, in Harris County, their indigent lawyer system really needs some work. For instance, just in the last year, there was one lawyer who had 969 cases that they disposed of. And let me tell you, as a lawyer, if I had 100 cases, I would have drove here in a Rolls Royce. So that person had 969 cases that they got rid of, and that's like four every working day. And let me tell you, I have to work many hours in order to get a good result on my cases. So that's a really.
Aren't there all plea bargain cases nowadays? Plea bargain.
Most of them, are plea bargains. That's correct. And I just wanted to point out that some of the standards that have been put out by the American Bar Association and other groups say that if you're a lawyer, you shouldn't handle any more than, for instance, 77 first-degree felonies in 1 year, or if you just handle the simple misdemeanors, no more than 236 Class B misdemeanors. These are the standards that are set forward for like public defenders and so forth. And so we do have a public defender's office here in Harris County, and they do a great job. I know many of the lawyers that work there, and they have implemented maximum amounts of cases they can handle. And so even those lawyers don't only handle 150. And I should point out what's the difference between a public defender lawyer and a court-appointed lawyer. Well, a public defender lawyer actually works for an agency called the Harris County Public Defender's Office, and they're salaried, and they're just like the district attorney's office, except they're working for the defendants. But a court-appointed lawyer is just someone that's appointed by the judge to get a case, and sometimes they're appointed for every case for a year or for a week or so forth, and they get just tons of cases. And there was 62 lawyers last year of these court-appointed lawyers who got over the recommended amounts, and the biggest one being 969 cases.
And what was he paid per case?
That amounted to
Ballpark.
less than $200 per case.
And the county or the city pays that, or
The
who
county pays
pays
for it.
it?
The county pays for it. Yeah. The county, they're like a public office, like the Harris County District Attorney's Office, only with the Harris County Public Defender's Office.
I think there's a conflict of interest in the court-appointed lawyer system.
Sure, I believe there should be. You could consider that because, of course, the judge is the one who appoints the lawyer to the system, and he's worried about getting his docket down because he has a lot of cases to take care of. And if you're a lawyer who wants to set it for trial, ask all get the evidence and hinder him getting rid of his cases, well then that's not gonna that's gonna look bad at his docketable expanded and so forth.
Time defending your clients.
Right. And there was a law passed called the Fair Defense Act, which was supposed to remedy that, but they put in this sort of exception in the Fair Defense Act, which left open that a lot of judges are still using these attorneys for a year, attorneys for a month, attorneys for a week, where they get all the cases that are indigent and just loads them up. So that is one of the major problems we have in Harris County is the indigent system. Another problem we have, which is contributing to jail overcrowding, is the bail bond system. Here in Harris County, for example, we have a very low amount of people who are awaiting trial, who are let out on bond, personal recognizance bonds, where they don't have to pay any money. Of course, all the people here could probably afford the small amount that a bond costs to get out of jail if you were so unlucky as to get arrested for a misdemeanor. But there are, certain segments of the population which don't even have they don't have an extra $100, and so they have to stay in jail. But Harris County has one of the lowest personal recognizance bonds rates. So in other words, they have to stay in jail while their case pens. As a matter of fact, according to the latest statistics from the Texas Commission on Jail Standards, approximately 70% of all people in the Harris County Jail have not been convicted, but are awaiting trial, and their case is still pending. And now the personal recognizance bond rate is one of the lowest in the United States. It's only a few percentage points. Now the legal standard, the Supreme Court has decided what factors can decide what puts a person on bond. One is danger to the community. That's one of the factors. I mean, if you're determined to be a danger to the community, they can keep you in there. Like, let's say you just, assaulted, 3 people on 3 separate days. Maybe they would like to keep you in there. Or another one is your likelihood of returning to court. Now, let's say you had 3 failures to appear, or you've been a fugitive for a couple years, then they might not give you a bond. However, barring that, you're supposed to get a bond. Now, the question becomes is, let's say that you're a poor person who has the same exact bond factors as a rich person, and you both get a bond set at $1,000. And the only difference between you and the richer person, or even the middle class person, is you don't have the money. So you still are just in the same boat as far as a danger to the community and whether you'll return to court or not. But simply because you cannot afford the money to bond out, you sit there in the Harris County Jail. And just to let you know why that's bad for like conviction rates and so forth, let's say that you're in the Harris County Jail on something like, let's say you got a fight at a bar, and you're in there for simple assault misdemeanor, and you are in jail. And so you go to the courtroom on the 3rd day, and the prosecutor says, well, if you plead guilty to this charge, I'll give you time served and you can get out. And if you don't plead guilty, I will see you in a month. What you gonna do? So the mere fact that you're in jail pressures you to plead guilty because of these offers that they give you. And it doesn't seem to be fair that just because you're poor and can't get out of jail, you should have that hanging over your head.
So now you have a criminal record.
Yeah, you could have a criminal record. So, and that's one way that the people of the middle class are treated, probably better. Upper class is treated better than the poor because they just can't get out of jail.
What is the cost for taxpayers for a day in jail?
Harris County, it's approximately $40 to $50 per day. Yeah, and that's another good point is that.
But if you stay there for several months waiting trial,
Yeah.
then it really can add up.
Well, yeah, 30 days times 40 is what, 1,200. A whole year is about $25,000 per inmate. That's what it amounts to. So,
You said that's 80%?
what's that?
You said that's 80% of those that are in jail?
Approximately 70% of the people who are in the Harris County Jail are simply awaiting their verdict. Exactly.
That's significant.
Yes.
And about what kind of time frame is that typically? Are we talking about someone being in for a week or a month or?
Well, I mean, a lot of people will plead out quickly because their court-appointed lawyer generally wants to plead them out on the very first day. These overworked individuals. As a criminal defense lawyer, I've always found that the more times I reset a case, just the mere act of resetting gives me a better deal. I've only had one case I remember, and I remember because this is the only case where it happened, where just merely resetting the case did not lead to a better result. And I've had hundreds of cases. So, the next issue I wanted to bring up was trace drug cases. And now trace drug cases are those cases where there's an extremely small amount of, let's say, cocaine, like in a crack pipe. They're often called crack pipe cases. And these actually are a significant number of the people that are in the Harris County Jail are in there on these charges of these crack pipe cases. Yeah, it's a felony. It's a trace drug case, it's called. And when Tommy Thomas was the sheriff, he and the prosecutor back in those days, like in the 90s, and before that, they aggressively pursued these trace drug cases, and a lot of people in the Harris County Jail were these particular type of cases. Now, when Pat Lykos came along, who was a DA for about 4 years or so, before the a couple of years ago, and she actually decided that she would make those into treat them as misdemeanors and not jail people, basically not jail people for it, and that ended the overcrowding. Now with the new people who are in the Harris County District Attorney's Office, which is Mike Anderson, who got elected, and then unfortunately he passed away from cancer. Then his wife took over, who was an ex-judge, Devon Anderson. They've re-implemented the trace drug cases and putting people in jail and being very aggressive about that. So that has added to the overcrowding.
You haven't mentioned it, maybe you will get to
Sure.
it, but the serious mental illness in the jails.
Yes.
And the impact of that has,
Mhm.
and the cost to the taxpayers.
Yes.
Because they're being treated in jail as opposed to
Yes.
community mental health.
Exactly. As Sheriff Garcia used to say, he runs the largest mental hospital in all of Texas, and he did. I mean, it was many of the people in there suffer from mental illness, such as bipolar, schizophrenia, depression.
Randall, I was on a grand
Sure.
jury one time, and these traced drug cases with crack cocaine.
Yeah.
One of our members said that anybody who's using that kind of cocaine would not knowingly leave anything in the crack pipe.
Yeah.
So there really should be nothing left in there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
I heard Robert Norquist made a statement, he compared bipartisanship to daydreaming.
I don't. What does that mean?
What? Repeat the statement. What did he say?
Well, I don't. I can't repeat it. But now speaking of drugs and their courts, there is a drug court that they have now, which is designed to get people who have a problem with drugs, not the sellers or not ones that there's a violent crime, but to put the people into this drug court where they receive treatment, maybe going to facilities and getting encouragement and so forth, and different treatment programs for the people who have serious drug problems. I, for example, had one client who had 3 separate methamphetamine charges. He was caught 3 times while I represented him for having a small amount of methamphetamine on him, and I got him into the drug court, and he successfully completed their program, and he had all 3 of those felonies were dismissed. And they also recently opened up a mental health court at the Harris County criminal justice system, where people who have mental health problems, and that's why they're getting in trouble, they can go there. As a matter of fact, I had a case where a fellow, what was he? I can't remember what he was charged with. He was charged with, I think, assault on a police officer. He was suffering from schizophrenia, and these officers grabbed him, and that's the worst thing you can do to schizophrenic, because he thinks you're the devil. For all he knows is you're a dragon coming to burn him up or whatever. And so he got a charge of assaulting a police officer, and I got him into the mental health court, and that was the second person who ever got into the mental health court. He successfully completed that and had that charge dismissed, because at the time he was going to U of H when all of a sudden this schizophrenia came up. A lot of times schizophrenia rears its head in your late teens or your early 20s. That's when it first crops up, and that's what apparently happened to this fellow. He was going to, because he had no previous criminal record at all, and so he was saved from getting a felony assault on a police officer. That's a pretty bad one too. When you got that on your record, assault on a police officer, that can haunt you for a long time. So
He lived through it, so obviously he wasn't black.
yeah. Well, I agree. Now, I do a lot of civil rights work, and I deal with people of all ethnic backgrounds. I have many African American clients as well as Anglo clients and Hispanic and so forth. And one of the things I'd like to point out is, some of these stats you see where there's so many African Americans in jail and arrested. I'd like to point out just one thing is that studies have shown, for instance, that African Americans and Anglos smoke marijuana at the same rate, 10% or 15%. However, for instance, in Harris County, you are if you're African American, you're 2.7 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession, even though you're at the same rate as an Anglo. So there is
Control white areas.
whatever the reason is, for some reason there is a disparate treatment that's backed up by the facts. And in some of the surrounding counties, it's one county, I can't remember which one it is, but one of the surrounding counties, it's 10 times, if you're African American, to be arrested for marijuana, even though, white kids and African American kids are using marijuana at the same rate.
It's not just some reason we don't know way out there, some kind of mystery. It's systemic racism and white supremacy. So it's not just some vague reason we're not aware of, I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, it's always a touchy subject because everybody has their issues on race and so forth. One of my ideas is that there are still many in the media and in popular culture. There are many still stereotypes about different ethnicities and their various groups. And one of the things that I like to do, or to tell people, I think is very good. Unless you get rid of it in your inside of your brain, unless you get rid of it in your subconscious, it really is going to express itself when you're out there in the world. How can you get, if there's something sitting in your subconscious, it's going to affect you. And the way that you can get rid of it is through various psychological practices that you can do to actually, in my mind, and I've experienced it, to get rid of racism. You can erase racism, but since it's so highly embedded in a person's psychology, maybe some of you don't suffer from it, but that's, I think in my mind, that's probably the minority. But you need to get rid of it in your own psychology, and then if you don't have it in your head, it won't come out. Because if it isn't, your prejudice isn't in your head, it ain't gonna come out because it ain't there. So now that's an aside, but it is important to point out.
Are you suggesting lobotomy then?
Yeah. Well, for some people.
That's very interesting. Are those self-administered programs, like you take tests yourself or answer things and then get feedback, say, from a computer?
Well, I know this is the humanist. First of all, I'd have to explain the concept of prayer. First of all, I'm not religious, but prayer is also can be considered how a person can train their own mind. In my mind, that when Jesus was praying, for example, he wasn't praying to a God; he was actually praying to change his own psychology. And if you could, you can change your own inner psychology by, if you don't want to call it prayer, you can call it chanting, or you can call it, repetition, or whatever you want to do. But that's one way to do it. And through meditation, I believe you also could do it.
I'm thinking of when you just don't recognize that you have racist
Right, well,
tendencies. In fact, if somebody asks you,
yeah.
you say, "I'm not racist." But in
Well,
fact,
it
these
sits
things
in
are
it
embedded.
sits in the subconscious.
Yeah,
The
so-
subconscious by itself is not conscious. It's below conscious. Sub. If it was conscious, you'd be aware of it. But I think that a lot of people do suffer from subconscious prejudice, which affects the way they might vote, the way they might, be for some certain laws, and the way they act in society. So, anyway, that's kind of an aside in a way. But now another program which is a good, a program that should be implemented in Harris County but hasn't. It's called the Citation Program. Now, the Citation Program is a program by which people who are accused of or arrested for Class A and B misdemeanors, which is the majority of the people in the Harris County Jail, 60% is misdemeanor, 40% is felony. The Citation Program allows a person to be not arrested and go to the jail, but they have to bond out, but they get a ticket, much like you do a traffic ticket. When you commit a Class C misdemeanor, it is a Class C misdemeanor, by the way, to get a traffic ticket. And so when you get a Class C, you just sign something that you'll appear in the court. And so that also could be done for most Class B and A misdemeanors. This is a law that was passed in Texas approximately 10 years ago. It's called the Citation Program, but it hasn't been implemented here by the Sheriff's Department or the City of Houston. What they could do it if they wanted to, but they have been very reluctant to do it. One of the reasons probably is the power of the bail bond companies. The number, when you consider all of the people arrested and all the bonds that are written, it adds up to tens of millions of dollars every year. And there are many bail bond people that contribute to judges' campaigns and so forth. So you got a problem there with the bail bond companies. So I'd also like to speak about some of the jail conditions. Recently, a couple months ago, it came into my knowledge that, through some of my acquaintances, that if a female inmate came into the Harris County Jail, she was not issued bras or female undergarments. They weren't issued them, and the poor people, the poor folks who couldn't afford them, just wouldn't get them. And also that was the same way with feminine hygiene products, is they weren't always given, you know, feminine hygiene products, and they were, or sometimes would run out and so forth. Very indignant. You know, this is not even the basics of common decency. And I collected the information, and I find it kind of hilarious because I brought it forward to this group, the civil rights group that I belong to, called the Greater Houston Coalition for Justice. But anyway, I brought it up to them, and we were going to act on it, and then some members called the sheriff, and he set up a meeting with us like the next day, and then he solved the problems. So now the sheriff wrote us a letter on April 20th describing how he had solved all those problems so that the female inmates are treated better. And here's the worst one, and you know, like I said, I'm from rural Minnesota, so some of these things are kind of embarrassing to talk about. But one of the things that was going on was that there were male guards guarding the females, which would include being able to watch them in the shower. And so that was actually going on, and this letter even talks about that. And that was the biggest thing that really got me riled, and why I wanted to do something about it. And so but that changed also. Now at the Harris County Jail, it's 99% female guards guarding female inmates, and also before the male guards, sometimes you have to have a male guard, but before they enter the cell area, there's a female guard that goes in there and makes sure everybody's dressed properly and so forth. But those are some of the indignities that went on at the Harris County Jail. And there's still others, but those are some of the changes that have been.
Were men given underwear when they went to jail? I just kind of wonder whether
I don't. You know what? Well, first of all, they don't need bras. So part of this had to do with bras. But as far as your undergarments, I don't know.
Give you a jumpsuit. Harris County, you give you an orange.
Yeah, they give you an orange jumpsuit, right? Exactly, for both males and females. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, but it's changed now. So that's good.
I'm going to ask you a question. I'm not sure. This doesn't pertain to Harris County.
Yeah.
But you've been following that case in Waller County with that young lady who allegedly committed suicide.
Yes.
Have you been privy to any information that's come out of that then?
No, I haven't. However, even if it was suicide, there were problems at that jail where they didn't watch the inmates close enough and they didn't meet the jail standards. They've already been, I think, cited by the Texas Commission on Jail Standards for not watching the inmates like they're supposed to. They're supposed to check on inmates every now and then. And I do know that, and one of the things that had occurred was, I believe that she had got her head injured. And I do know that sometimes when you have a head injury, this can cause depression. It happened to a friend of mine once who had never contemplated suicide or thought about it, but they had a concussion and they tried to commit suicide, and then they never did it again in their whole life. That concussion can apparently cause you strange things can happen. So you've got to watch the inmates when they come in.
One thing I've heard about it, I don't know like how many people heard, but the latest I heard is that she did try to get bail the day before she allegedly committed suicide.
Yeah.
I heard that the Waller County Sheriff, now this was on Amy Goodman's show, said that he had been fired from another department in another county in Texas because of issues, anger-related issues.
Well, what I read was even a little more worse. Was he was fired in 2007 when he was the chief of police of some town for racial issues.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Yeah, that's what I read. But yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
The letter that Kevin read to us from a female prisoner, I don't know if it was in Huntsville, but it sounded like...
It was in Indiana.
Oh, it was in Indiana? Yeah. It sounded like she had to forfeit an exercise period.
Yes.
And had to go to a religious group of some sort. Surely that is a violation.
Yeah, well, you can't be forced to go to a religious service if you're in prison or jail.
Did you get the sense from her letter that that's
I don't think
what
that's
was
exactly
happening?
what it was. Maybe Vic can tell us later about what that letter was again. But I think it's sitting right up.
Oh, what about it?
Would you like to read it?
What about the letter?
It's right.
Well, it sounded like she had to forfeit her exercise period
Well, so
in order to
application
go.
time that they get per week, a certain amount. But what happens is when the church comes in and does their proselytizing, that counts as the recreation time.
Yeah.
If you don't go, you don't have an alternative. You lose it. It's either go or you have no recreation.
Oh, so it takes the place.
Yes, exactly.
The proselytizing takes the place of your outdoor time.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah. That's probably in the Constitution. Yep. Oh, it's absurd.
Homosexual rape problem in Harris County Jail?
I'm sure there is a problem. I have not had any cases recently regarding that, but that is a problem. I know that there was a recent federal law passed, and maybe some of you have heard it. It's called federal law called the Prison Rape. And basically it's a federal law that is designed to prevent or lessen the probability and the occurrence of a rape in prison, both by guards and by inmates. So let me see if I got any other issues here. Oh yeah, one other criminal justice issue that I've been working on, and this will be the last one, is the city of Houston not too long ago passed a law where you have to get permission as to time and place in order to feed more than 5 homeless people outdoors. And so we've been working on getting rid of that criminal law. And as a matter of fact, there's going to be a rally against it at the Reflecting Pool on the 28th at 1 o'clock, Houston, downtown. Houston.
Information for that. We have atheists helping the homeless.
Well, what I'll do is I just started a Facebook event page about this. And we're going to be going to speak to City Council on that same day, Tuesday the 28th. And I'll tell you how people to sign up, because we're going to be signing up under the title Giving and Receiving for 3 minutes. I'm going to give the information to Vic and he can send it up.
Testify.
Yeah, you can testify
We did for the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, so.
Yeah.
Were you working on that at all, or?
I was generally a supporter. I don't think I was specifically working on that. But anyway, so that's what we're going to be doing.
That's great. Have there been any citations on that? Has anybody gotten charged for feeding the homeless?
Well, no, but the reason that I believe that they aren't is because then once it gets into the court system, you can bring up a challenge as to constitutionality, whereas if there's no case pending. Because their idea was to just stop the feeding, and they've accomplished that. Most of the people, when they're faced with that fine and the possibility of jailing, they just quit. They don't challenge it. And as a matter of fact, most of the people who used to go downtown, the downtown area, to feed the homeless have quit doing it. So, sir?
I'd like to mention one thing. Recently, some of these police arrests and people who've been killed in arrest, the police departments across the country have not been collecting statistics on these things. And I don't know if everybody's aware of it, but the Guardian, the newspaper in England, is constructing all the evidence of people who've been arrested, and they're asking for people to come forth.
Yeah.
And it's building very, very rapidly.
Yes.
So if you know anybody where they've been assaulted or beaten at a time of arrest, you should report it to the Guardian. Because they're just going right around the government. The government doesn't have the stats, they're building.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is a website called Civilians Down. It's called civiliansdown.com, and it has on there every police shooting and wounding in Harris County for the last 20 years or so. It was started by 2 mothers whose daughter, in one case it was a daughter, in the other case it was a son, was shot and killed by the Houston Police Department. But this is for all of Harris County, and these people, eventually, just recently, decided to not do this anymore. So I took over with some of their help, and so it's back up and running. It's called civiliandown.com, and that has the names of every person who has been shot and killed or shot or injured in Harris County by law enforcement for the past 20 or so years.
Another thing that I
The 70% of people who are in Harris County Jail because they cannot make bail, I think that's a real tragedy there. They don't somehow let them out and give them a court date. If they don't show up, then go arrest them.
Increase the personal recognizance bonds so people can get out, or implement the citation program where you don't even get arrested for Class B misdemeanors, which are your most common, or 66% for the most nonviolent ones, the nonviolent crimes, and then you can just give them a citation to appear on your court date, and you don't even go to jail.
You
better
because
solution.
if you don't show up when you have to, you
Yeah.
get this ticket, then you get an arrest warrant, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
You still get the
It's
same
like
arrest warrant.
It's just like a traffic ticket.
Right, and the officers are still free to determine what your likelihood of showing up. So in other words, if they were to look at your arrest record, because they can just find your arrest record like right away on what's called the Texas Crime Index computer, they can look it up, and if you've failed to appear like 3 other times in 3 other cases, they can decide, oh, you're not one of these people who I want to give this to. So they can still make the determination. Or if it appears you were doing very dangerous crimes, like you had just been on a spree of assaulting a whole bunch of people, they don't have to give you the citation. They can make you go to jail. So they have some discretion there. But right now they have no discretion. They have to arrest and put people in jail for Class B misdemeanors, which could be driving without a license. You know, you don't have your license with you. Stuff like that. Ma'am?
I had a question about social media. I mean, I think that I'm not the only one who heard about that case in the county on Facebook.
Yeah.
About that woman that was. What is the role of social media in the criminal justice? I mean, have you seen it work for you or against you? Does it do anything when you share that story?
Yes, I believe it does. More and more people nowadays are using social media to get their news. As a matter of fact, even though I'm 55, I'm using social media to get most of my news. You know, I get the stories that people tell me. So a lot of news is now disseminated through social media. And social media is a tool you can use it to rally people to go to meetings. That's what I do. To go to meetings or to go to press conferences, like the one we're having on the 28th. At 1 o'clock in front of the reflecting pool downtown about the anti-sharing food ordinance. So it's a tool. That's my experience.
Okay, we're gonna wrap up here, so maybe just 1 or 2 more questions.
Alrighty.
I wanted to ask you one question. What's your opinion about this thing? And it kind of sticks in my throat. I'm not really sure what to think about it. When children allegedly commit adult crimes, and they say, well, because they committed an adult crime, we got to give them an adult punishment.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, when this first started,
because they're
my
still
little talk,
children.
Yeah. Well, punishment doesn't seem to work for a lot of people, and probably for children even less. There's other methods of incarceration and punishment. That's my belief. I think it's backed up by the studies and so forth. But once again, society in general has a big element of revenge. They hear about a crime, they want revenge. They don't really think about what works best as long as they get their revenge.
Oh, actually, you know what? On that note, I didn't mention earlier when I read the letter from the inmate. I didn't go into detail about what happened with her case, but basically, she was a minor. She was 16 years old. She had just gotten her driver's license. She had smoked marijuana at some point that day. Drove that night and hit a motorcyclist, and he killed him. She was only 16. She got 6 years in prison. She's still, so 6 in that 6 years in prison. 16 years old, and she got 6 years in prison. Because apparently in Illinois, any amount of marijuana whatsoever, they never showed that it caused. She didn't take any. There was no sobriety test or anything, but just because there was any amount in her system, it counted as being a DWI or whatever. And so.
And she could have done it 3 months ago when it was filled up in her system.
Well, she did smoke that day. Okay, but.
Is there any more questions? Yeah.
Where do we stand on medical marijuana use? Is that a statewide issue?
Yeah, that would have to be passed by the state. The state legislature would have to pass that. That's a statewide issue.
Rick Astor said as long as he's governor, it'll never happen.
One more question? Dick?
Okay. I guess my question is the overall trend of people using cameras and things like that for their interactions with police. Would you say it's a good thing?
Oh, it's a great thing. That thing is probably one of your best tools, the best developments ever. Let me give you an example. Rialto, California. In Rialto, California, they issued all the officers body cameras, and the officers reporting use of force, where they have to, because they use force, that went down 50%, but the citizen complaints went down over 80%. And that was the only change that was made. So cameras, yes. And there's just one last thing I want to say. And that is, if you're ever injured in an accident, call 1-800-RANDALL.